Okie dokie, we're getting ready to assemble the head, getting ready to put the valves in the head. So prior to doing that, I've run a tap down all the threads in the cylinder head. So that's mainly these three either side that hold the rocker boxes on, and then these four corners that again hold the rocker boxes on. And on the T160, not forgetting the two that hold the center manifold on. As you can probably see, this one has already been helicoiled in the past at some point. The other one's okay. And I've also checked, I haven't got a tap, but I've checked the integrity of the spark plug threads. They can, start to break up. You'll just see, little bits of thread missing, but these look fine. Okay, yeah, so we've done that. It's back from the engineers. They've put in 6 new valve guides for me, and they've recut the seats, and he's told me that I don't need to grind them in. The new valves, they just go straight in. He says he's done all that for me, and he's also skimmed the head to make sure it's dead flat. So that's all marvelous. So we've got new valve guides, we've got the seats cut, we've got the head skimmed, and we've checked all the threads. There are, of course, 6 threads on the manifolds, but the manifolds were on the head when I got it, and I've just left them on. So I've not checked the threads, I've just left the manifolds on. The thing to note is that these inlet manifold stubs on a T160 are handed. So they are marked, not very clearly, but let's have a look. Hopefully you can see an L, if this will focus, yeah. So there's an L, that's the left-hand manifold, then there'll be a C, and then there'll be an R. Okay, so just note that they are handed inlet manifold studs. Great, yeah, so all that's done. We've checked the oil holes are clear. And then we've got 3 new exhaust inlet valves, which are bigger, and the 3 smaller exhaust valves. And we've got a new set of valve springs, which are 2-part valve springs, an outer and an inner. And those are the old valves, and we need them for the seat, the valve spring seat, the valve spring top, and the collets that go round the valves. And then the rest we'll not be using. I bought 6 valve stem oil seals. I know we've been around this before, so I'm not going into it too much, but basically you normally just put valve stem oil seals on the inlet, because that when the valve opens, the piston is sucking air in, and it sucks oil down the valve stem. You don't normally put valve seals on the exhaust, because of course when the valve opens, the piston is coming up and it's pushing the air out, so that not much oil goes down there. But I put them on both, simply because the Tridents tend to have a reputation, a well-earned reputation for smoking, and so I put them on just to belt and braces approach to try and make sure that they don't smoke. Although I think most of the smoking is attributed to the cylinder bores and the piston rings. But anyway, that's why I do it. But everyone, some people are telling you not to. It's one of those. I mean, I put them on, but there's no hard and fast rule. So you pay your money and you take your choice. Okay, so yeah, I think that's about everything. Yeah, so we've checked all the head, checked everything's ready, nothing needs doing to it, no threads. We've got our new parts ready, and so now we're going to start putting the valves in the head. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fit the seat for the valve springs. Now I'm doing that because on some engines, but not this engine, if you put the oil seal on first, the oil seal over the valve stem, then you can't get this seat on. So I just do it now, just as a matter of course. But on the Trident engine, you can put the stem seal on, and then this will go over it. So what have we got? We've got the exhaust valves here for the sake of argument. I'm just starting with that one. So putting the spring seat just over there. I think we can see that, can we, to some extent? I know it's not very close up. Then I'm going to put the valve stem seal on, and it's basically, there's a little groove on the top of the valve stem, and there's a little lip on the inside of the seal, and so simply goes on, and it sits in that lip. I'm not sure about these, but just be aware that on a lot of these, that once the stem seal is on, you can't get it off without destroying it. So just be aware, make sure that you're ready to put that stem seal on. Okay, then what we've got the springs. We've got an inner and an outer, and they're painted. And I think the convention is that we put the painted side down towards the cylinder head. Now, I think on these springs, they're even springs, so that the coils, there's no taper or anything. They're not progressive. But on some heads, you'll find that the valve springs are tighter at one end and open at the other, in which case you put the tighter springs to the head. But these, it doesn't actually matter because they're both even, the springs are even. But we'll put the painted side to the head because that's the convention. Then what we've got an exhaust valve stem. That's always good. And we've got some assembly lube. So I'm going to put some assembly lube on the valve stem seal. So I don't want to damage that. And then I'm putting some on the valve stem. This is why normally when you start an engine up, the first thing that will happen is you'll get a big puff of smoke coming out of the engine, which is fine. It's all this sort of bit of lubrication and that coming out. Right, so we've lubricated the stem, and then I'm putting it through, and I'm just going to make sure, it has, yeah, it's all gone through. Yeah, and if you can see that, then this stem, the old stem on the right, is appreciably longer than the new one. Yeah, so we're okay. It just looked a bit long suddenly to me for a minute. Then we've got to put the spring cap on. It's probably got a special name that I can't remember. But the cap on the top of the springs. And then we've got our valve spring compressor. And we're going to compress the springs so that we can then put the collets on the valve stem to hold the spring compressed. So we've got our valve spring compressor. We're going to open it up, and we put this wound end on the face of the valve in the cylinder head, and we put this weird open end on the top of the spring. There it clips on. I think, am I got this on camera? I think so, just about. Then I'm going to wind the compressor up, and in so doing I'm compressing the spring on the top. And I'm going to keep winding it in. I'm making sure that this top bit of the compressor is fairly central around the valve stem. And I'm winding this up. And if anything, I'm going to kind of overwind it. Right, let's see if I can turn this now so you can see it. You probably can't, but never mind. Right. Just for a second I thought I'd put the old valve in for a minute. Right, so what we're doing now is we've compressed the spring, and we're going to get the collets, and they fit round the stem of the valve. I'll get it the right way up, and they sit on that stem, and they lock there against the head of the valve. And because they're tapered, then the taper will hold the top of the valve spring, that valve spring cap, or whatever it's called. So now it's a bit fiddly. I'm going to try and get the collets in around the valve stem. Now, it's always a bit fiddly. Now, the general rule I find is that if the collet, the first collet, will always go in. I know you probably can't see this, but it's bloody hard for me to try and do it on camera. The first collet normally slips in there around the valve stem. The second one, sometimes it won't go and you're there for half an hour. And as a general rule, this is only a general rule of course, I find that if the collet won't go in, it's because you haven't compressed the spring, the valve compressor enough. I don't think that wants to go in. Is it? Go on. No. I just don't think I've quite compressed the valve. I don't quite think I've compressed it enough. It doesn't quite, nearly wants to go in, but not quite. And I find that tends to be a common problem, and people are there, including myself, for a long time trying to get these damn collets in. And the reason they won't go in is because you haven't compressed it enough. There we go. And it's gone in this time. Because there we go. So I'm now going to unscrew the compressor a bit, just to make sure, slowly make sure that those collets are in the right place and they're not going to spring out. So I'm just undoing the compressor a bit at a time, just making sure those collets are sitting nicely and they're not going to jump out. There we go. Loosen off the compressor. When it gets to nearly the end, then we can just clonk it at the bottom. There we go. And there we have the first valve in place. Now, one thing about this valve, I saw the engineer and he's cut and ground the valves in. So he said to me, you do not need to grind these valves in, but I've already done it for you. So that's quite important to note, because often, I'm trying to find my mallet, where's that one? Where's my magic mallet? There it is. All right, so he said, no, you don't need to grind these in. Because normally you would put a bit of grinding paste on the seat of the valve, that's this edge here, and then grind it in to make sure that this edge and like this cut edge of the valve seat are really perfectly together so that there's no gas leak. But he said, don't worry, I've already done it. Right, so I've got my mallet, the collets are in, and I'm going to give the end of the valve a good old little tap. Yeah, that sort of tinging sound, that's the valve going down slightly and then coming back up. Just to seat the valve a bit. They will seat anyway after we start the engine. What I mean is, no matter how many times you hit it with a hammer, they'll probably reseat themselves, and that's why after I start an engine, the first thing I do is then readjust the tappets, because it's amazing that you can do all this, set the tappets. As soon as you start the engine, everything kind of settles down a bit. You'll probably find that 4 of the 6 are still exactly as they were, and 2 of them might have closed up completely, or even opened up completely. Normally closed up completely when everything's kind of settled in a bit, and so always do that. Right, so that's the first valve in, first exhaust valve. So I'm simply going to go round and carry on with the other 6 in the same order. Rightio, and there we go. We've got all the valves in. Got the oil seals on top of the valve guides, got the springs, got the caps on, and all the collets located on the valves. And there we go. Underneath we have our lovely brand new set of 6 valves, 3 exhaust valves, 3 inlet valves, and that should be really nice. So we should have good gas tight seals on the valves, and all good. So we're now ready, or virtually ready, to put the cylinder head on the block, on the barrels. So yeah, that's also always looking so nice. I do just love it, don't you, when you've got those new pistons and the barrels have been reboard, everything's looking great. So I just need to put the dowels, these holes for the oil ways, there's 6 of them, where the oil drains down. So, of course it's the wrong way up. So we got these holes in the, oh, no, I've put the valves in now, you can't see. But where the spring is, there's a drilling. And that drains the oil, because if you think about it, the oil can't get out. If there was no hole, the oil would just sit around the valve and it would actually overflow the valve stem and then just start running down the valve stem. So there has to be a way out for the oil out of these cups, if you like, these sort of basins where the valves sit. So there's a hole drilled in the bottom there, and it comes out through the head there, and it carries on down, draining down these drillings through the barrels and drains back into the sump. Anyway, there are little dowels that fit, go in the end of these holes to try and keep it oil tight, and they were taken out by the engineers when they skimmed the top of the barrels. So I've bought new little dowels, and we're going to fit those in. They literally just tap in, and then when that's done, then we'll be ready, and we'll put the barrels, put the head on the barrels, which is always a momentous occasion, and you feel like you're really getting somewhere with that engine. Anyway, yeah, valves in, great.